I'd like to begin with a meditation and prayer. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, that we are all one, that we are all equally of you. And so we allow ourselves to let go of our thoughts of doubt, limitation, concern, fear. Not because they're not real, not because we can't learn from them. We can pick them up as we need to learn from them. For right now, we allow ourselves to go deeper than our personality's fears, deeper than our personality's concerns, to a place where there's only love for us, only love, nothing but love. I invite us each to imagine that we're looking into the eyes of a very, very great master. Perhaps it is the Master Jesus. Perhaps it is some other master, whomever you wish, or you don't have to have a name. You are simply looking into the eyes of a great master, feeling the presence of a great master. And as we do this, feel this master look past our appearance, past even our talents, past our self-concept, past our accomplishments, past our deeds, to the inner us, where all is beautifully and wonderfully made. And as we look into this master's eyes, something miraculous happens in each of us. We begin to know that we aren't limited to what we thought we were. We know on a still deeper level what we've talked about for some time now, that we're unlimited beings, that we're part of God. And yet, deep within our cellular level of our very being, we know that we're so much bigger than what we thought. So much more perfect than we ever dreamed. So unlimited, so free, so miraculous. So we ask this Master to stay within our hearts. Even as some followed masters, and still do, from place to place, because when they followed, they best knew themselves. They looked in the eyes of a master and knew, I'm wonderful. And so we ask this master to remain in our hearts, that we might remember, I'm wonderful. I invite you to say aloud if you're comfortable doing that, and silently if you're not, together the words, I am wonderful, together. I am wonderful. And so it is true. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, that we will receive tonight whatever we need. Thank you for the presence of these ancient ones who will speak to us tonight, for their joy in communicating with us, for the privilege of hearing that which they will share with us this week and in many weeks to come. Thank you that their presence is always with us, as is the presence of all that comes through the white light, the light of the Christ, the light of every master that ever walked this planet. And thank you for the many, many beings of light who help us with each and every moment of every day, whether in or out of our awareness. We open our hearts. We open our minds. We open our beings. We open our bodies to be clear, to know the truth, and to live it. Thank you, God. Amen. For those of you who have been listening to the tapes or been here a great deal, last spring I channeled a number of times that mediumship, directly letting a being come in and speak through, though it's true and it's real, is not as helpful to the physical body as other forms of channeling and to the personality, because it splits one from oneself by moving over. I have recently been shown, I don't think I was ready to be shown until now, a way to channel where I can literally sort of go on a trip with all of me intact, my little kid self and all parts of my here and now self and ancient self, etc., to, I'm still here, I'm in my body, but I'm also traveling to the place, the beings, to receive the information. So as I'm speaking to you tonight, I will be channeling. My voice will not change, I don't think. And I will not have a being using my body to speak through me, but I will telepathically, visually, sound, sight, everything, be receiving the information and reporting it to you as exactly as I see it, as it happens, like if I were watching a movie and seeing it. You may see snatches of this in your own minds, or if you're not visual, you'll feel it or know it. We're all channels. I'm not doing something that is out of the range of what you do in the everyday. It's just a different version of it. So I didn't want those of you who were in on the other part to think, oh no, Donna's blowing her circuits by doing it the way she wasn't supposed to. It is a new form of doing it that I have just recently been shown, as I have recently made contact with the Anasazis. I have asked John Busenberg to do an introduction to the Anasazis before I channel, because it is through John that I became interested in them, and that we traveled to New Mexico and went to Chaco Canyon and started receiving, actually on the plane on the way out, I started receiving information. There was instant contact as soon as we were on the plane. All of a sudden there was all this information coming through just really rapidly, and there's been contact ever since. But I would like John to explain the historical part, because he is far better versed in it than I.
Not a lot is generally known here in the East about the Anasazis as much as people in the West, and I had the opportunity to live in the West, and so, in fact, live not too far from there. I first visited Chaco Canyon about 10 years ago, and have been back quite a few times since, and have been each time just so very impressed with what this particular civilization has been able to accomplish. And in terms of reading and going to lectures and things like I was able to do while living in Colorado, there's just a great deal of excitement out there about what these people, the people of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, what they have been able to accomplish. So what I'm going to do is just give you a few highlights of what they have done. Now, this is looking at it from the point of view of the archaeologist and what we can find there physically today. And then Donna is going to go in and channel from the ancients who were there what the other side of it is. What do the archaeologists not know? What do they dig up something and they look at it and they don't know what it is. They have a big question. And there are many more questions than there are answers as it relates to the Chaco civilization. So first, where is Chaco? It is in the northwestern part of New Mexico, about 100 miles from the Four Corners, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico come together. It's in a very desert area, about 8.5 inches of rainfall a year, very no trees there, sagebrush and low shrubs of that type. It's not a real attractive area from most people's point of view. When were these people, we're talking about the people of Chaco, when were they there? about 900 years ago. Their peak building time was from 1075 to 1115. Now, there were people there in that area much earlier than that. In fact, for several thousand years, there's evidence of people being there, but they were very widely dispersed and living in a very primitive sort of a way, living in pit houses and not in large communities at all. And when Chaco came together, we had a phenomenon of a very rapid growth of a civilization that went to a very high peak in terms of its technology and its building, and we have to assume in terms of its organization and other things too. So the name Anasazi, which you hear used many times referring to these people, where did that come from? That's a Navajo word, and it's a Navajo word that means the ancient ones. And we don't really know what the people called themselves, if anything. They may not have called themselves anything at all. But this is the word that has kind of stuck, the Anasazi. There are other words that are used to describe these people. Donna and I normally refer to them either as the Anasazi or the ancient ones of Chaco Canyon, and I prefer the ancient ones. The Chaco phenomena, what we have in the space of a very few years, these people went from, as I say, a very sparse inhabited area to a great population density, and they built cities very close together. These cities are really huge buildings, but since there's 800 rooms in a building, they call them a city as itself because it's a self-contained unit. It has full of rooms and kivas and courtyards and other things all in one enclosed area. And that's what you go to Chaco today to see, the remains of these great cities that are in Chaco Canyon. Some of these buildings were built to a height of 4 stories. So they were larger than any building built anywhere in the world until some apartment buildings were built in New York City in the 1880s, was the largest building that existed for many, many hundreds of years until this building in New York was built. So it was quite a feat that they were able to accomplish out there. Now, one of the many questions that is asked about these people, how did they build these huge, very complex, multi-storied buildings, which were obviously engineered to be what they were because they were very wide at the base and the foundations were able to support these many stories of stone, which is what they're made out of. How were they able to do this? Particularly when you have to ask this question when you look at the fact that Pueblo Bonito, for example, one of these buildings, there's about 12 of them, very large ones, and then many smaller ones, has in it more than 1 million stones, which have been all quarried up on top of the mesa in a quarry that's up there, brought down, and it's a veneer type of a stone. They have all been faced and worked so that they're very, very smooth, and they fit together so closely that many places in the best part of the masonry, you can't drive a knife blade in there. They fit together so well. There's more than 1 million of these, and an architect who was speculating on this said, how in the world could these people, given the numbers of people who lived there, bring all of this stonework down and work it and build this building with a population like they had? It was just, to him, it was, and to everybody else who has looked at it and studied the numbers, it's just an impossible task to try to answer that given present-day archaeological methods. Through using dendrochronology, they know when these buildings exactly were built and the period of time by looking at the tree rings that go into the beams that form the ceilings of the buildings. And they know that they went up in a very short period of time. How were they able to do that? And speaking of the beams, there are in Chaco Canyon, in just the major structures, not all the others, there are 250,000 beams made out of large ponderosa pines, some of them 26 inches in diameter. Many of them smaller than that, just about 8 inches. This is probably the most typical size that you see when you go there. But 250,000 trees had to be cut and felled, and the closest forest was 40 miles away. 40 miles away. They had a few smaller ones 30 miles away, but the bulk of the forest at that time were 40 miles away. So these trees had to be moved, and none of them are scarred, so they didn't drag them. They didn't, when they got to the cliff edges, they didn't pull them down over the cliffs. They all had to be supported in some ways. And again, they did this with a very small workforce. While there may have been at its peak 6,000 people living in Chaco Canyon, certainly it was a far smaller number that would be available to do this work, because the women had to be doing the cooking and all the other things that women at that time were doing, or at least they speculate. And there had to be a lot of people in the fields growing food, and small children and all of that. So there was a relatively small number of people available to do this carrying of the stone and the working of the stone and building the buildings and carrying these trees. So how did they do that? Another question which is not understood well, not understood at all actually, is how did the people live in this very sparse land where rainfall, as I say, 8.5 inches a year, and things don't grow very well at all out there unless they're irrigated. And there's a Chaco Wash, which is a little stream that goes through the area, was hardly big enough to irrigate very much land at all then or now. They speculate that there's enough land and moisture there that they could have maximum raised enough food for 2,000 people, yet there were 6,000 people or more. The estimates range from 6,000 to 10,000 people living in the Chaco Canyon area. So this is another big question, another thing that they have been able to do that mystifies us today. Why did they have so many kivas? Again, Pueblo Bonito has over 30 kivas in the building. A kiva is a round hole, usually cut in the ground. Some are elevated, but usually cut in the ground, anywhere from 20 feet in diameter to 60 feet in diameter, lined with stone all the way around, with certain features built into it, like benches around the side and features out in the middle, which nobody understands. There's a firebox in the middle, that's understood, but other features out in the middle on the floor of the kiva are not understood. What were these for? Why did they have these kivas, and why did they have so many? Scientists have written that these must have been very, very religious people to have so many kivas, because they assume the only thing a kiva is used for is some type of a ceremony, because that's what the Pueblo Indians, the Hopis, and the other Indians of that part of the world use their kivas for today. So these are some of the questions. Probably, in my mind, one of the biggest ones, and the one that's going to lead us to the clue as to why Chaco was what it was, is the question of the roads. Scientists have found through aerial survey and other means hundreds and hundreds of miles of roads. Now, these are not ordinary roads. These roads are 30 to 40 feet wide, and they go in an absolutely straight line. They don't go around obstacles. They go up over the top and down the other side. Now, why would prehistoric people who did not have any carts, they did not have any wheels, they did not have any draft animals at that time, build such wide roads? And why did they build them in a straight line and in the way that they did? And many of them don't go anywhere. Some of them go to where there are other ruins, other pueblos were in existence at that time, but many of them don't go anywhere. Now, why did they do that? And fortunately, the channeling that Donna has been doing has provided us with some answers, which are just, to my way of thinking, just fascinating. And maybe we'll hear some of that tonight. But this is a very brief overview of Chaco Canyon at this point in time. There are other questions that we won't go into about their observatory. They have an observatory so that they can plot when the equinoxes and solstices are, and the moon cycle, and all of those things were known to these people. And all of these things that I've been mentioning set these people of Chaco Canyon apart from other Native Americans who were living contemporary to them. People at Mesa Verde, which is more well known, they had some of these features, like they had kivas and so on, but they didn't have most of these things that were in place at Chaco. And Chaco came first. Chaco was there. Really, the peak of Chaco was 100 years before Mesa Verde. And the Kenyatta Anasazi in Arizona, they didn't achieve these things either. Chaco is really, really unique, and so maybe we'll hear some answers as to why it's unique, and maybe, more importantly, hear how some of the wisdom that these beings have to share with us, how we can apply that to our lives today, because that's really the most important part. The other is of great curiosity and excitement, but knowing what we can use of this wisdom today in our lives is really the important part.
The ancient ones wish to communicate with us, one, because they say we contacted them by our interest, and that all of you are part of that, in that in one way or another you have been connecting with Native American teachings, or teachings about energy, or teachings about the masculine and the feminine, and other teachings that relate to what they did. They wish to give us the gift of their knowledge, their energies, their help, in order that we may bring about balance in ourselves and on our earth. So they will begin tonight by telling us and explaining the answers to some of the questions John posed, and then applying it very personally to us, one part of it, tonight. And then each week they will take another set of questions, so to speak, and teach us about energy. More will be clear as I speak. These were not just a civilization of people evolving from cave people, so to speak, to who we were today. It was not just a step in the evolution. A number of souls originating from the Pleiades agreed to come to the planet Earth to help balance the energy of masculine, feminine, those are the words we use, or positive, negative, but that doesn't mean bad, or if you wish to use the Chinese words yin and yang, the polarities of Earth were out of balance from the beginning. It is being explained to me this way. The souls that helped form the Earth, the energy that helped form the Earth is God energy, yes, but there is always free choice. And the souls, in their eagerness to create, did not always as fully set up the receiving as the creating. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. Nothing's wrong, because in everything that is of God, there is an innate perfection. Everything is manifesting to its perfection, is heading toward its perfection. So this statement does not mean things are all messed up and were from the beginning. What this statement means is that there was more energy toward bringing into form than there was toward receiving pure energy, pure God energy. Now, it takes pure God energy to bring into form. But if the choices being made are so much in a hurry to create that the energy is not as full then of the part that gathers energy as it is the part that disperses energy. So Earth was not only out of balance within itself, and this is what helped to bring about the cataclysms of Atlantis and other imbalances, and was present at the time period of which John spoke. And these souls from the Pleiades realized, many beings realized, that the planet Earth was out of balance with the whole solar system and with all star systems. It needed to have more of the feminine polarity or the receptive polarity in order to be in balance with everything that is. To use a very simple example, an analogy, Earth was a talker and not enough of a listener and needed the balance. So these beings, rather than create a major scene by arriving from outer space directly, which would have drawn attention at some point, which might have impeded progress and the efficiency of what they were doing, chose to be born in primitive nearby villages as babies, and then as they grew up to older youth, to go elsewhere, which was not at all unusual at the time. The societies did not stay in one place permanently, and it was not at all unusual for a group of young people to get together to go forth to establish a new settlement. So they went forth, but guided from within to the exact place necessary for literally the chakras, the energy centers of the earth itself. Now, this was not the only place this was done, but these ancient ones who are speaking to us are the ones who had to do with Chaco Canyon. So we're not going to discuss Machu Picchu, Peru, and other places at this time, but we are going to receive a lot of information about the balancing of energy that our planet now needs still, and that we inside ourselves still need, especially, I am told, in our society. Okay. So as they went forward to start this new area, they had within them very special psychic abilities, you would call them today, tools to use. They also had visitations from other beings from time to time, both in spirit and embodied. But if an entire civilization had sprung up without anyone going to start it, the chaos it would have created in the surrounding area would have been at counterpoint to the purpose. So they went forth, and the very first thing that they did was to, using energy, and more will be explained in a moment, create these large pits in the ground, round circles in the ground called kivas, now called kivas. These were receptors, energy receptors. That which is pointed or mountainous or big is more an energy generator. That which is a pit is more an energy receptor, the masculine and the feminine energy. Or if you wish, these are not the best words for it, but in English, the words positive and negative have come to mean good and bad, and that is incorrect entirely. Light and dark have even come to mean good and bad, though dark was as worshipped as light by the ancient ones, and as fully understood to be precious and wonderful as the light. More will be explained about this also. So, the first thing they did was to build kivas, many, and they continued to build kivas. Now, they were not just haphazardly scattered. More was known about energy by these ancient ones than is known today, tremendously more. So there were precise calculations by understanding and feeling the energy of the earth, including its pain as well as its vibrancy. They were able to know exactly where these kivas needed to be for the balance. Later in the civilization, some kivas were built strictly for worship, but even then, they were in the place where that worship needed to take place to help balance not just the area of Chaco Canyon by any stretch, but the whole planet. Now, as we said, this was not the only place these were being formed, but this is the place we are talking about. There are, as John mentioned, roads, immensely wide roads, and they come together like rays from a sun or rays from a star leading inward to central points, but not necessarily a central point where there is a city or a town or a civilization. These were not rocket ship ports as some have surmised. These were energy lines to bring energy in. They were collectors of energy. They were not formed by hand, which brings us to the next point, because much was not formed by hand. These ancient ones, who had originally come from the Pleiades, and helpers who came from time to time to help them, were able to take in energy themselves, to be energy receptors, to take in the light, the potency of energy, into themselves, gather it to such a force that somewhat like a laser beam, it was able to go forth and cut stone, plow roads, bring trees, literally fell them and then propel them like there was an invisible pathway through the air to push them. Now this energy was collected within beings, and then collectively they did this work. In the beginning, there were just the beings who were of the Pleiadian origin and knew of the uses of energy and had these talents. As the civilization progressed, it became a teaching civilization in which those who were ready to learn and to use it correctly were taught as much as they were able to learn about the use of energy. Many, 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 many different things. Manifestation, propelling things, cutting things, creating with the patterns of nature, not ever creating in spite of the patterns of nature or over the will of nature, but co-creating with nature, rain, or whatever was needed. This was done not for any spectacle, and in fact was done in privacy almost, and then later taught as sacred teachings, not in any way relating to the ego. That would have been an entirely unknown concept to be proud of such work. It was what needed to be done, and it was the duty to do whatever needed to be done. The native people whom these beings came through already had a purity of spirit that had the following beliefs, though not necessarily spoken. The belief that within each person there were special qualities, that these were to be respected, and the person would learn from within as well as from without. That whatever a person's special gifts were, they were only to be taught to those that the person was guided to teach them to. There was no greediness for other people's gifts. That nature, the sun, the moon, the stars, that which grew, were brothers and sisters of every person. That earth was an entity of its own being and a giver in that way. So the fertile ground to allow these gifts to be used was already in existence in the native peoples of the area. Now, because the major concern to begin with, the major mission, and this was truly a mission, for these beings were coming to a planet that was not as comfortable for them, not as quick to accept and understand, a lot of the people did not have the talents they had, but they came on this mission out of pure love. The picture I'm seeing are lots and lots of souls wanting to come out of love, out of caring, wanting this planet because it is such a beautiful place, physically beautiful. The energy is turned into so many kinds of beauty, and the people have such beauty within that these beings are volunteering, saying, oh, I want to go help. Their hearts are so eager to help our planet still, then and still, to become its full potential. And they see, as they communicate it to me, its full potential as being a magnificently beautiful place for returning to God wholeness of each soul on the planet. Returning to, we would put it as no limitations, no space of feeling that we can't or that we're separate. A place that's like a workshop or a classroom, it is now, but a place where everybody wants to go to do that because of its very aliveness, because of its very potential, because here every person creates with the power of God through their mind, through their feelings, through their knowing, through their beliefs. A place where they know that, where consciously it is a privilege to come as part of the return trip to the infinite knowing and to the infinite. Because the major thing needed was the balance of the masculine and feminine, some of the beliefs that were inherent in the answer of virtually every question that John referred to need to be stated before we go to the answers to the questions, the rest of the answers. And that is, people from the first day there, and some of this was in the background of the Native Americans they came from, but it became far more powerful. From the first day there, the sun, the light, was like a representative of God, and the darkness was a representative of God. The darkness represented God in Mother Earth, in the human experiment, in being on the planet, but very much God. The light was God, not so much in form, God energy, pure God energy. From the first day there, every day, everyone got up immediately, before dressing or doing anything, faced the direction in which the sun would rise, or was rising, depending on the time of year and the time of rising, but faced the direction of that time of year, not just east, but the direction of that time of year. They knew precisely. And greeted the sun with the greatest opening of the heart, with the greatest love, with the most phenomenal thankfulness. Songs, chants, and most of all, the openness that said, oh, thank you for your light again today. It was not taken for granted for 1 second. Always such tremendous thankfulness for it. And then many times during the day, the beings were to sit in the earth darkness. These big holes, kivas, had roofs across, with a hole for the smoke from the fire to go out, or a hole to climb down, or both. But from within this darkness, to receive the energy of the Mother Earth, for never did they think the sun more powerful than the energy of the Mother Earth. It took both, and anyone dwelling in only one and not the other would not last long. This, they say to us, is still true. That part of our disease, mental, emotional, physical, etc., is due to the fact that we do not spend enough time in what they call the darkness. Now, by the darkness, they mean the inner clear space within us. They mean the energy of the earth itself. And they mean total receptivity, what the Eastern religions have taught us for meditation. It all comes together as one, but what it means is going into almost a void, going into a space so clear, yet dark. Not to get a message, not to see something. There were times for that, but there were times to be just in the space, that you might return to the purity of the emptiness
out of which comes birth. If there is no dark circle or sphere, then there's nothing for the sunlight to fill, do you see? So it was as important to sit in receptivity as to act. Out of this receptivity, they learned to then take in all the energy that could possibly be needed for any task, and to unite their energies in total oneness. Another basic tenet, absolutely necessary to everything they wish to speak to us on, is that oneness, the sense of what is for the highest good of all, ruled everything. There really wasn't a lot of government necessary from early days even to when it became much more advanced and not more advanced, more complex because of more people migrating in. There wasn't a lot of government necessary because the entire philosophy was whatever was for the highest good was obviously the answer. So there wasn't the same kind of greed that there is today for whether it was possessions or food or someone else's talents, or there's no I wish. It wasn't even a word. It didn't exist. Why would you wish? Well, everything that could be needed is right here. What's there to wish for? That was the philosophy. And so there was a ceremony developed every single morning according to the angle of the sun. So the time varied in different seasons. At a particular angle of the sun, I'm having trouble putting this into our words. They're showing me, and that's the closest I know how to describe what they're saying. Everyone gathered in sort of extended family groupings in the kivas. Now, not every kiva was for worship, but the kivas that were for worship, or what we'd call worship, they sort of call it life. I don't think worship was a word because worship and life were so intertwined. They would gather together, and the purpose of the ceremony was to recognize your oneness with everyone there, with all of nature, with the earth, with Father, Sun, and sky, with all that was. And the oneness was so total that no one would have dreamed of going out of there and stealing from his or her neighbor or doing less than their share of the work or lying. Or the oneness was so total that it established complete rapport, telepathic rapport. And what you were doing, everyone else knew also. And so things worked sort of impeccably because everyone was connected enough that no one thought to be tricky or there was not a competition because of this. There was a community oneness that made everything possible and nothing impossible. The stones that were quarried, the trees that were brought in, the roads that brought energy inward, made use of light. The ancient ones, in their ability to absorb and store energy, and there were some more talented at it than others, and this became their, we'd call it job, their mission, their part of the mission, would sit in the light. Yes, they had gone into the darkness to be in the space of emptiness. It was important to be empty in order to have a place that could be filled. After this, they would then go sit in the light and literally took in the energy of pure light. It didn't matter if it was a cloudy day or a sunny day because it's not just sunshine. The energy of pure white light. Took it in. And when they were filled all together, then whatever the task was to be done, they knew how to focus so well that whatever was needed, this light went forward to do so.
to anchor the energy. Now, this is something we need to talk about for a minute because this is one of the things we don't know much about energy. I think they want to do a whole evening on anchoring and holding the energy, so this is just a brief definition. Anchoring energy means energy is always floating around of every kind. You know, a conversation is energy, and your excitement's energy, and your anger's energy, and your sexual energy's energy, and everything is energy. Plants are energy, and your energy, and everything's energy. But energy is always changing. We have all the laws of physics to talk about that. Energy is always changing. And when an energy needs to do something to produce a road or to balance the energy of the earth, then it needs to be anchored in such a way that it continues to do that job. It's still always changing its form. For example, the air inside the kiva is not the same temperature from season to season and day to day, but the energy is still an energy of receptivity and of going deep into the gifts of Mother Earth, and far more besides. And so it was necessary to anchor energy so that the first thought wave that came its way didn't disturb it. They did such a good job of anchoring energy that the energy anchored in Chaco Canyon to this day is extremely, powerfully loving and full of light. So powerfully loving and full of light that if you sit still and allow it, you cannot imagine a moment on the earth where there wasn't love. Cannot imagine how anyone could do an act of violence. Cannot imagine how earth could be anything but love and perfection. That much energy still anchored. Not disturbed by civilizations later, not disturbed by tourists since. Still there. Powerfully there. So part of the job was to send the energy forth, but another part was to anchor it. And some of the formations had to do with anchoring the energy. John briefly mentioned a watchtower of sorts, a very high butte, rock, sitting up sort of in the middle of nowhere, middle of a flat area. And there will be a whole evening, I think, on what this was all about, because a lot of it applies to today. But in essence, there are stones lined up there where the light comes in, and at different solstices is marked exactly at one in the very middle of the spiral, at one to the left, and at one to the right. This wasn't just a way of marking the seasons or something about planting. This anchored the energy for the entire area. It was extremely important and still is. Interestingly, the Park Service had to close this area because there were so many rattlesnakes, and also the tourists were hurting things, destroying it, some accidentally, some on purpose perhaps. Interesting that so many snakes came. The ancient ones tell me that the rattlesnake has always been the protector and anchorer of energy of this area, a magnificent one. And so they have gathered in this particular butte, Fajada Butte. There are snakes standing guard, literally, that the energy continues to be anchored in this area because it is so important to our earth. Now, rather than continue answering questions tonight of the sort that were posed, but there will be many, many, many answers, I don't know how many weeks they're going to speak on this because there's so much for them to share with us and tell us. But what they want to do with the rest of tonight is to say, what does this have to do with us now, and how can we begin using some of their knowledge and their wisdom today, right now, in our lives, starting tonight. First, they plead with us, really plead with us, to learn to receive. They say that even those of us who meditate a great deal don't receive in between meditations very much. And we are learning. They're not saying we don't know anything, but I think they're saying we're still pretty primitive in this. And they suggest a practice that we do. And they say that if we followed this practice, if we really make this practice all that important to us, not just do it for a week and forget it, but really make it important, that it will totally change our ability to work with energy. And a lot of the things that we wish for, whether it's prosperity or whether it's friends or love or stability or self-confidence, will start to happen in our lives if we will just do this very, very, very simple practice. And that it will sound so simple to us, we may think that it is not complex enough or high enough, and that is not true. That the highest practices are often the simplest, and it is this. They're pleading with us to notice, just notice in our lives for the next 90 days, that's a long time, for the next 90 days to notice when we're letting energy in and when we're giving it out. Not to in any way judge that. This is not, we are not to grade ourselves or degrade ourselves, either one. We are to simply notice, I was just taking in energy. I was just giving out energy. I was only giving out energy. They just showed me, sorry to giggle ahead of the joke, but they just showed me a button, okay? And it says on, okay? And it's stuck. It's like there's this red light flashing danger and the on button's stuck. We're just to notice how often our on button is stuck. How often we in actuality run from the space that to us we think is empty or we think is a void. The space of just being, the space of allowing, the space of underlined, capitalized, not trying. Non-trying. We need a new word. Non-trying. And what they're saying is for 90 days, just notice. Now, it's fine out of that noticing to begin to change your habits, but the focus is noticing. They are then suggesting that after those 90 days, we start programming ourselves, reconstructing our lives so that after each putting out of energy, we take in of energy. And they give me an example. They say after they would gather energy and then put it out to, say, fell 90 trees and propel them over. You know, we need 90 trees by tomorrow. I don't think that's quite how they did it. But they, you know, literally they said 90 trees. I don't deal in numbers, so when I'm given a number, I know I didn't make it up. I never even know the date. 90 trees propelled over. But as soon as they finish cutting and propelling 90 trees, they don't run out and get supper. Somebody else gets supper. They then go into a space of totally allowing themselves to refill. Sleep, deep trance. Apparently there's a state that somewhat combines those two that I don't think we've perfected or we even know, or maybe we have moments of it, but the way I'm seeing it, it doesn't seem real familiar. It seems to incorporate the two. Probably the closest we would have is lucid dreaming, where you're in a deep enough trance to be dreaming, and yet you know you're dreaming. Something like that. We have so much we can learn. So what they're saying is, on a very practical, apply it, here's what it is. For 90 days, notice when we're putting energy out and when we're taking it in, or even just allowing. It doesn't have to be a conscious taking it in, that's trying. Just allowing ourselves to be. They're saying that such things as daydreaming, meditation, and the state of relaxing just before meditation and just before sleep are the closest that we probably know of just allowing. The times when you feel like, ah, I really can let it all go and just feel this peace. Maybe you get it in a group meditation, maybe when you're by yourself, maybe just as you're going to sleep, maybe when you pray, maybe when you walk outside and look up at the stars at night, or when you go and sit by a beautiful stream. So they're saying notice when we do each, and if we wish to make new choices through that noticing, that's fine. After 90 days, then we consciously follow every act of putting out energy with an act of taking it in. And they are saying it is totally possible in our society to do that. You can be in your job, you can look like you're doing what everybody else is doing, but you can be allowing the flow. I take in, I give out, I take in, I give out. And what you will be able to accomplish is far more than the others, though you spend 50% of the time in the space and 50% of the time putting out energy. You will still accomplish far more than those who were turning their wheels a lot in the snow without them going anywhere. So they want to close tonight by saying that you cannot get from where our lives are right now to co-creating rain with nature, and they are going to talk about that more another time, and to propelling trees or, disembodying, meaning take your body with you when it's time to go, which is what the Highlands all did. That's why they can't find the number of bones they think they should find in Chaco Canyon. One of the questions archaeologists keep coming up with is, how come we don't find more skeletons? Well, you find that, it's obvious by the number of pots and everything else that thousands of people have been to this place, but there aren't thousands of dead, bones left over. What happened? Well, the high beings went and ascended, took their bodies with them. But they say we can't get from where we are right now to that if we don't do the simple practices, because we've got to basically start totally over again with what to do with energy. Our inner selves, our highest self, our soul self, whatever we want to call it, knows, absolutely knows. But we've had lifetimes of practicing it backwards and contorted. And we have the total possibility to do it, and to do it quickly. The energies on Earth are ready for us to just move forward and cut through all this old stuff, and we don't have to revel in what we did in the past lives or in our childhood or anything. They're ready for us to move, and we're all doing it. We're moving, we're growing as fast as we can possibly keep up with, and sometimes so fast we wonder. And yet, what they're saying is, if we're not reprogramming how we work with energy, then we're going in circles still. And so it's absolutely, they're not just making a passing statement about energy. They're saying, for the sake of the planet and for the sake of our own evolution as souls, it's time to get to work. And the way to get to work is to start noticing what we do with energy. And the very most important thing is that we take in, we give out, we take in, we give out. Now, it doesn't mean you got to do 20 minutes of take in, 20 minutes of give out. It's according to what the need is. So if you just cut however many trees they just said and brought them all over, you may have put out a huge amount of energy and may need a whole day of taking in. Whereas if what you did was to accomplish something at work, it may not have taken that amount of energy. You may just need a deep breath. On the other hand, it may have taken a huge amount of energy. You may need a few minutes of looking like you're doing paperwork, but in fact you're taking all the energy in that you need. And they're saying that there's something we need to develop with this, and that's our faith in our, again, unlimitedness, God ability, because we block ourselves by saying, but if I do that, I won't get all this done. If I do that, there'll be people still in need, and I didn't stop to help them. That with our noticing, we need to continue again and again and again to affirm, to know that everything we need is within us, that our process is divine, and that we can do it. everything we need to do. And then we are doing it right now, right here. Even though we have a long way to grow, we are doing it. And what they're also saying to us is that we've done a lot of preparation, all of us, spiritual, psychological, emotional preparation, to be at the point where they could tell us this, that they couldn't have told us this a few years ago because we weren't ready to do it. And they say that they thank all of the spirits of all of us and all of the spirits that help us. They mean guides, angels, whatever you wish to call them. All of the spirits that help us and all of the spirits of the earth, the sky, the sun, the stars, the moon, the water, the fire, the air, all that is, for participating in this magnificent becoming. And they thank us for our part in that. And they gladly speak to us for as long as we need, as much as we need, to help us in this. And they say good night. And I need a half a minute here, and then let's join hands for meditation. Let us imagine a kiva. I will describe a kiva. They're not all identical, but this is fairly typical kiva. We are seated deep within the ground. There is stone all around us. Beautiful stonework, small and large stones, layered in so magnificently that it's beautiful to look at. And there is, in this kiva, for it is large enough to hold us all, a sort of stone ledge. Some of us are sitting on the circle in the stone ledge, leaning our back against the wall, and some are sitting on the ground at the base of the stone ledge. In the center, there burns a fire. Except for the firelight, it is dark in the kiva. And we can hear every sound magnified because we've gone deep into the silence. Every crackle of the fire, every pop, the smell of the pinon. We feel it, and we thank the spirit of the fire and the spirit of the trees. And we know ourselves to be deep, deep in the bosom of the Mother, our earth. We know that above us we are watched, guarded and taken care of by our Father, the sky. And we allow ourselves to become very simple, to let go of the layers of skins that we've accumulated thinking they were useful. We allow ourselves to trust. We are gently and lovingly held in the giving and forgiving energy of the Mother within us and the Mother Earth. And that when we need help in any way, the Father within us guards, guides, brings into form, manifests what we need. And so we don't need all those layers of defenses we made up. For the Father within stands guard, the Mother within nurtures. We're going to have a moment of silence for all of us to feel the love rocking us, adoring us. The voice within says, "You are my blessed child. You are only good, and I love you." We'd almost forgotten the inner mother and the outer one. So forgiving, so loving, so understanding, so compassionate, so totally trusting and loving of us. We'd almost forgotten the inner Father, so aware, so strong, so capable, taking such good care of us. And now we remember. And we vow to let this in, to notice when we're not. To notice that every time we breathe out, we do breathe in right afterwards. To let that become the pattern for all of our energy. Thank you, God, for all we're learning and for doing it together. Thank you, God, for these ancient ones and all other spirits of our planet, on our planet, and with us in oneness in every way. Thank you, God. Amen. Now you can slowly bring your attention back to the room or place in which you're sitting and the time in which you're living. This tape has been produced for you by Living Guidance and is copyrighted. If you're interested in copies, or if you wish a brochure listing the other tapes we have of Donna Spring Gulick's channeling, please write us, Living Guidance, 508 Colony Woods Drive, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 27514. If you're interested in joining us to hear one of Donna's channelings, we'd love to have you do so any Thursday evening at 8 p.m. at the above address. We will not be meeting Thanksgiving or the Thursday just before and just after Christmas this year, 1988. Thank you for listening.